All right, well, thank you all for coming. My name is Michael Elrod-Erickson. I'm the president of the Strength Sports Interest Group here, and today I'm talking about how to get started with your strength training. So first off, why should you strength train? Physical inactivity is the fourth leading risk factor for death globally, only behind high blood pressure, tobacco use, and elevated blood sugar levels. And that was according to the World Health Organization. And then the CDC, the World Health Organization, and the American College of Sports Medicine have all agreed upon these guidelines for physical activity, that every healthy adult should do at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity physical activity or an equivalent combination, and that every adult should do muscle strengthening activities at least twice per week for all major muscle groups. So if you fall under that category of a healthy adult, then according to all these major health organizations, you should be resistance training. So why am I credible to speak on the topic? I'm a 4.0 GPA exercise science junior. I have 6 strength and conditioning certifications. I have been coaching for 4 years, including 2 seasons of high school track and field strength training, and have done 4 internships. And then personal experience with lifting, I've been lifting 6.5 years, gained almost 60 pounds from when I started, and I compete in powerlifting. So my best numbers are a 347 pound squat, a 265 pound bench, a 490 pound deadlift, and that was that photo. I qualified for the North American Championships.
You need to credit me on that picture, really.
She took that photo.
Yeah.
So the main points for today, some basic training principles, etiquette and expectations for the gym, and then now I'll provide some resources. So first off, some basic definitions. Rep or repetition is how many times you perform the movement consecutively without a rest. So if that was 5 repetitions, you would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you rest. And then that would be 1 set. So a set is a grouping of reps, and the number of sets is how many times you do that. So together, these 2 things give you volume, which is the quantity of work. So another term is intensity. It's the difficulty of the movement as defined by how much energy is required per unit time. So intensity and volume tend to have an inverse relationship. So the harder something is, the less time you can do it, or the longer something is, the less intense it's going to be. And an easy illustration of that is like sprinting versus a marathon. Even if you try, you can't sprint the entire duration of a marathon because that's just not how physiology works. And then one important thing to clear up is low intensity things can still be difficult or feel hard, especially when you're doing them at high volumes. It just means that there's less work being done per unit of time. So a quick little check for understanding before we move forward. I want you guys to partner up with the person next to you, and then we'll just go over these 2 quick questions. So first, how might you visually demonstrate the concept of reps and sets using dots and shapes? And if you want an example number, we'll do 3 sets of 6 reps. And then second, do you think the intensity would be high or low to carry something light for as long as you could? And then how about the volume? And I'll give you guys maybe a minute or so to talk those over.
Yes.
All right, so everyone got a chance to talk it over?
Yes.
Okay. So there's multiple ways that you could have done this, but here's an example. So if the dots are representing a rep and the grouping of them and the shape around them represents a set, then you're going to do 6 of them, take a rest, and then do that again 3 times. And then for the example of carrying something light for as long as you can, light means it's probably going to be pretty low intensity. And then since it's for as long as you can, the volume is going to be in relative terms, slightly higher than it would otherwise be, because there is that inverse relationship there. So this is a general rule of thumb. It's a spectrum of like what you're training with different rep ranges. So the fewer reps that you do in a set, the more it's going to lean towards strength, just because the intensity is going to be higher. Whereas the more reps you do per set, the less intensity, and therefore it's going to bias more towards endurance. But the important thing here is that this is very much a spectrum. There's no like hard cutoffs. So while it says like 1 to 5 reps, there's nothing magical about 5. 6 is still going to train strength. 7 is still going to train strength. It just gradually drops off a little bit more as you go towards the endurance side. And same thing going the opposite direction. And then hypertrophy here in the middle, that's just a fancy term for saying like growing muscle or muscle mass. And you can certainly build muscle mass with sets of 5 or with sets of 20. There's no hard rule of 8 to 12, but that is typically a pretty good range for people just looking to start out. And then the other thing to consider is that these movements in the gym are skills. If we want to get good outcomes from them, we have to be good at doing the movements. And getting good at movements requires practice, which requires reps. So a beginner is probably better off leaning towards that 8 to 12 or above kind of range just to get more reps. And then this brings us to the question of like, how do we prescribe intensity for a workout program? If you had a trainer with you in the gym, they might just straight up tell you what weight to use. But most of you are not going to have that luxury. And then a % of your 1 rep max is often used. But the problem with that for beginners is your strength level is going to increase very quickly. So every time you do the movement, you'll probably be getting better at it. So finding your 1 rep max and then using that % for a long period of time is not going to work very well for you. So this brings us to some alternatives. Rate of perceived exertion is used pretty often. That's basically just a subjective measure of how difficult something was. But the one that we're going to lean towards is called reps in reserve. It's intentionally leaving a certain amount of reps in the tank or stopping that prescribed number short of being able to not do it anymore with good technique. And this is going to help accommodate for the fact that you're making rapid progress as a beginner. So for an example, 1 set of 5 reps with 5 reps in reserve, you'd be trying to choose a weight that you could do for 10 reps, but you're only doing 5 with it, and you're leaving those 5 in reserve, you're not doing them. And the thing with reps in reserve is it doesn't need to be perfect for it to work. You can be within a decent margin wrong in terms of how many reps you think you have in reserve and still have it work decently as a system. But in general, you should pay attention to how things feel while you're doing the movement, because that will help you try and learn over time to become more accurate with the reps in reserve and make good choices in terms of what weights you're choosing. But one caveat with that is that I'd say burning is not the best indicator of how many reps you have left, just because some exercises are going to have more sensations associated with them than others. So the thing that I would pay attention to would be how quickly the weight moves and how easily it moves. So if you're doing a set and it starts to get harder or the weights start to move slower, then those are the kind of things that you should be paying attention to. And then over time, you'll just get better at trying to gauge your reps in reserve, because it is a skill and it takes practice. And the program that I'll be providing does have a gradual build up towards the very last week. You're doing a set with 0 reps in reserve, so you go for as many as you can, and that will kind of let you calibrate your scale of how many reps you think you have left versus how many you actually can do. And the last benefit of reps in reserve is auto-regulation, which is just a fancy way of saying if you feel good, you can do more weight. If you don't feel as good that day, you don't have to do as much, so there's no need to like force things. So that's a good way to kind of have that built in there where you can go based on how you're feeling for the day. So a quick little check for understanding again. With the same partners that you had before, let's figure out if you have 2 sets with 8 to 12 reps, and then you want 5 reps in reserve, you should choose a weight that you can expect to do for roughly how many reps? Okay. Well, I would say we take the bottom and the top end of the rep range that we're after, and then add the number of reps in reserve, and that will tell you what weight you should be shooting for. So in this case, you'll want a weight that you can do for 13 to 17 reps, but we're only actually doing 8 to 12 of those. Does that make sense? And then the last of the main concepts here is progressive overload. So it's essentially this idea that exercise is a purposeful stress, and we're trying to get a desired outcome from it. So if you look at the little picture here, this is your starting ability, and then here is where we're doing the exercise and undergoing the stress. So as you get fatigued, your ability to do the thing drops off some, but then you recover and you come back to a higher ability level than you were before doing the exercise. So essentially, if we just stack up a whole lot of really small wins like this over time, then you're just going to gradually make progress. Your ability level is going to end up like way up here in the end. And a quick little math example, if you added just 2 pounds per week to your lift over the course of a year, that would be over 100 pounds added. And if you did 5 pounds per week over a year, that would be over 260 pounds added to your lift, which is a lot. So you really don't need giant leaps and bounds week to week. You can just make small progress over long periods of time. And then another thing, going back to this graph, unfortunately, you need to keep exercising or you kind of lose some of the benefits. Like say you went through this once and you were here and you didn't exercise again, it's just kind of going to drop off back to your baseline where you started out. So the key is to keep doing the exercise at the right time so that you can make progress. So then the training program that I'm going to provide, a lot of it is based on machines. And the reason for that is because it's going to constrain the movement. That means instead of being able to move in every direction like you could with free weights, the machine has a pivot point or pads, things like that, that mean that you can essentially only move in the way that you're trying to with the movement. And that's good because most of you guys are not going to have coaching. It's going to take less skill for the exercise to be productive because you have to get decent at doing exercises for them to really benefit you in terms of getting the desired physiological outcomes from them. And then also, if you do want to make the move to free weight exercises later down the line, I think building some muscle and strength with the machines first is just going to make that transition even easier. So that brings us to using machines. A lot of them are going to have some combination of adjustable seats, backrests, chest support pads, leg pads, or a range of motion adjustment. So if we look at this one as an example, this back part of the seat slides either forwards or backwards, so it can accommodate people with different limb lengths, like here through here. This part either moves up or down to accommodate people that have different leg lengths, like here through here. This part, you would pull on that little pin and then adjust it like forward or backwards so that you can scale the range of motion, whether you're starting with your legs back here versus out in front of you. And then lastly, this one, you would drop down on the top of your thighs so it keeps you secure in the machine. And I know that seems a little overwhelming at first if you've never used this machine, but this is one of the more complicated machines to use in a gym in terms of the sheer number of adjustments. And the good news is the program that I'm providing has video links that walk you through the adjustments to the machines and then how to perform the movements. So then to choose the weight with the machine, a lot of them are going to have a stack like this that runs on that pulley system. So you would pull out the pin and stick it in the weight that you want. And then if you wanted a smaller jump between one of these to the next one, which is typically like 15, 20 pounds, if you wanted to go up less than that, some of them have these things at the top where it stores like 5 pounds. So you would pull the pin out of that and then lower it down onto the weight stack, and that would let you get 5 pounds, or if you use both of them, it would be 10 pounds. And if the machine doesn't have that, then in the fitness center, kind of between all the cable stuff in the center of the weight room, there's a stand that has all the cable attachments. So like long bars and that sort of stuff. On top of it, there's some of these, which is essentially just a 5 pound weight that you can slide right in here. You'll see that the weird shape of it kind of lines up where it can stick in between all the parts of the machine there. So that lets you add 5 pounds at a time and go incrementally between the options on the weight stack. And then another tip with machines, if you find a setting that works well for you, then you should probably write those numbers down, because like it'll say 5 or short, medium, long for the leg stuff like that. So just write down the settings so you can skip right to it the next time that you use the machine. And then to briefly touch on warm-ups, the main goal of a warm-up is to be able to do the workout safely and to improve your performance or the benefits from the workout that you're seeking. And then this brings us to the question of, well, what do I need to do to warm up? A lot of people are going to think that they need to either stretch or foam roll. We'll come back to that on the next slide specifically. But I would lean towards more specific warm-ups. So if you're trying to do a leg press, you could probably warm up for your leg press by doing a light set of leg press. And as a general rule of thumb, warm-ups become more important and necessary if you're training at higher intensities, higher skill activities, or if you're trying to get into positions or ranges that are really difficult to get into. And the majority of the program that you guys will be given does not necessarily meet those criteria. So there's fairly minimal warm-ups. It's essentially just one warm-up set on the first exercise, and from there you should be good to go. And that one warm-up set can be as simple as like using half of the weight that you expect to use on the actual main sets, and then that's it. So quick thing on stretching, if anyone feels like confused as to why I might say that stretching is not really necessary, I think there's a societal and pop culture sort of idea, yeah, that like everyone needs to stretch, but that isn't actually necessarily supported by the literature. So just as an example, 2014 meta-analysis viewed a whole bunch of studies on injuries in sports, and it showed stretching did not show any protective effect, while strength training provided a highly significant one. And then in the words of Dr. Michael Ray, the moral of the investment story here is that stretching offers little to no benefits in relation to the required investment of time, effort, and potential money. So that's not to say there's never a time to stretch or there's like no good stretches. It's just to say you don't need a super generalized stretching routine, and it would just add time to the program, and that's why I didn't include it. So if you want to stretch, you can, but it's not necessary by any means. And then if you're wondering, is there anything else that I need to do beyond strength training? The short answer, I would say for now, no. Like make one change at a time is fine. So in regards to your diet, whether you're trying to lose weight or gain muscle, when you're first starting out, beginning resistance training is enough of a stimulus that you should be able to make progress in both of those regards, pretty much regardless of what you're doing diet-wise, within reason, for the first little while. So then worry about the diet after you've kind of got the resistance training part of it down a few months later. In regards to supplements, I would say no one really needs supplements, potentially ever, but certainly until you've got the resistance training part down, and arguably you only really need them if this is becoming like a major aspect of your life. If you're like, oh man, I live to strength train, maybe it's something you should pursue. But if you're just trying to get more healthy and do this for like recreational benefits or something, then you really don't need them. And in regards to cardio, if you want to do anything more, I would say take a look at the physical activity guidelines that we mentioned earlier. If you're trying to hit 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity per week, then maybe you could do a little bit more cardio in order to try and hit that number. But the main thing is just try and be less sedentary in general, so you can go on a walk or ride a stationary bike at a brisk pace, which would be like just above what you could have a conversation with someone while exercising. And do that for like 15 minutes, half an hour, something like that. We're really just trying to like get your general physical activity up with that kind of stuff. So then moving on to the etiquette and expectations portion. First off, sanitation. So shared surfaces where your skin contacts them has the potential for transmitting like skin infections.
Does herpes count as a skin infection?
Yes.
Does what?
Thank you. Does herpes count as a skin infection? Yes.
I would think like things like MRSA, or there's some like non-sexually transmitted versions of HPV that come from like skin contact. So yeah, things like that you can just kind of avoid by wiping off machines before you use them, which takes like 5 seconds. So I would say that's worth it. And then the hypothetical ideal might be that you wipe things off before and after you use them. But I'll be the first to admit I only clean things before I use them. I don't wipe it off after. Because in my opinion, if anyone cares, they're going to clean it before they use it. And like personally, if I see someone get off a machine, even if they wipe it off, I would rather be the one to clean it off before I use it, because then I know the quality of how well it was cleaned.
Stop justifying it. Just clean it off after.
So yeah, that one is up to you, but definitely clean it before you use it. And then secondly, just don't go barefoot, especially in locker rooms and showers, but really public places in general, because there's some of the same stuff. Like if you want a specific example, you can Google plantar warts. It's like a little spot on your foot that's kind of painful and yeah, kind of gross. But that comes from like walking around barefoot in places that other people have, and that's why a lot of like buildings have like no shoes, no service type policies. So, and then in regards to clothing, I think a lot of people overthink this one. It's basically wear something that you're comfortable in and can move around. And gyms tend to be like 73 degrees-ish, assuming it's not like a warehouse type gym that doesn't have AC. So yeah, try not to wear like leggings and a sweatshirt and long sleeves. Celeste. And then in regards to shoes, like just as a general rule of thumb, flatter shoes that are less cushioned and grippier just kind of give you a better connection to the ground or the machines that you're using in general. So if you have something like Converse, skating shoes, or basketball shoes, as long as they're not like high top and restrict your ability to move around, those are good options. Slightly better than running shoes just because they tend to have that really thick padded heel. But frankly, the shoes don't matter that much, so even running shoes are fine. And just as a point to illustrate this, like hundreds of powerlifting world records are set just wearing Converse. Like shoes are not that big of a deal compared to what people might expect. So you don't have to go out and buy anything to get started with resistance training. It's like just wear the clothes that you already have. And then some social interactions that are unique to the gym, just to give you like a heads up in case you run into some of them. Typically, you have to swipe to get into a gym. It's because they're worried about people that don't have a membership coming in and using the equipment. So you might have a card or like a little QR type thing with a reader. And then if someone asks you to spot them, that means that they want you to like be there to watch and like help keep them safe while they do a movement. So if you don't know how to spot or don't feel comfortable doing it, you can just tell them. It's really that simple. Like no one's gonna get offended that you are not yet comfortable doing that. Like they'd rather know that than have you just try and wing it. And then working in, it's a term for if someone wants to like take turns using the machine, so that like two people can use it at the same time rather than having to wait around. And that's typically pretty easy in terms of adjusting the weights. But if you have like wildly different settings because you're 5 foot and 6'5", then maybe that could get a little awkward because you'd have to adjust a bunch of stuff. So just something to consider if you're thinking about like letting someone work in with you or asking if you can work in with someone else. Try and make sure that your settings are not going to be like too different if you mind changing them. And then if a machine is taken and you want to use it, you can ask to work in like we just covered. Or if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can just ask how many sets they have left and how long it might be so that you can have an idea how long you're going to wait around. And then if you have to, you can move on to the next exercise in the program and then come back to it whenever it frees up. And then typically people will leave something on the machine if they have like stepped away to go to the bathroom or fill up a water bottle. But if something has been left on a machine and no one comes back within a few minutes, you can probably assume that they just forgot their water and move it and just start using it if you want. So just use your judgment there. And then in regards to videos and mirrors, these are both useful tools for making sure that you're performing exercises well. So with videos, you want to start recording with the front camera, prop it up against a water bottle or against some plates. Like normally at the gym, I would just, do that. And then afterwards, you can watch and see how you're performing the movement, or you can send it to someone for feedback. And then try and set up your phone so that you can see the motion and any relevant joints. But when in doubt, a side view is typically the best one, like 9 out of 10 times. Like these two examples, a leg press, a row, you can see like the entire motion and all the relevant joints from this kind of angle. And then with mirrors, the thing to keep in mind is it's useful, but only if you don't have to alter the movement in order to use it. So if you're trying to do a row and you're here, and then to see yourself in the mirror, you have to be like, then it's probably defeating the purpose because you're trying to make sure that you're doing the movement well. And if you're altering how you're moving just so you can see if you're doing it well, then kind of defeats the point. So with either of these, try not to like turn and watch yourself. Just like set it up and forget about it and then watch afterwards if it's a video. Yeah, quick meeting for you guys. So just trying to set some realistic expectations around pain with training. I think the classic no pain, no gain is very like knuckle dragging Neanderthal of people. But a lot of people kind of overcorrect and go, oh, training should never hurt. And I think having a realistic expectation that like sometimes pain might happen with training just kind of helps you keep from catastrophizing if it does end up resulting. So just to cover what is pain, it's essentially an experience that comes from the nervous system. So you have receptors in the body for things like temperature or pressure, and these send signals to the brain and spinal column, and those try and interpret these signals and make sense of them. So sometimes pain could result from a new stress, like training a brand new movement that you've never done before. That would be a good example of something that might give your body the perception of threat based on those kind of new signals. But the important thing here that I think everyone should try and take away from this is that pain is not always associated with tissue damage. Sometimes it is just that perception of threat, even if there's nothing like wrong happening. So we can have insignificant pain that means nothing is injured, nothing is wrong. We just have some sort of thing going on, and it's up to us to like logically interpret whether there's a problem or not. So especially with new movements, that's something that could happen. You could have some pain that doesn't really significantly mean anything. You're not injured. It's just you're putting a novel stress on the body. So a little question list for trying to decipher if the pain is significant, like meaning you got injured, or if it's not. I'll just run through a couple of these. How serious is the pain on a scale of like 1 to 10? I would say 1 to 3 is probably going to lean you towards that direction of insignificant pain, but a 4 or higher is something that you should really like slow down and consider if something's going on. How quickly the pain clears up after the movement that kind of caused it. If it's within 1 to 2 hours, I would say it's pretty unlikely that it's anything significant. If it's 24 to 48 hours, then it's low but slightly higher. And then if it's greater than 48 hours, it's definitely a higher likelihood that something might be going on, and you should kind of give it a little bit more thought. And then, did it start from doing a new movement or something that was progressed possibly too quickly? So like doing too much too soon often can kind of cause pain. So if it does kind of meet those things, then I would say there's a slightly lower likelihood of the pain being something significant. And then, does the pain keep recurring from doing the same exercise? If yes, like for a few weeks, that's okay. If it keeps happening after more than a few weeks of doing the same exercise regularly, then it might start to mean that like maybe you're doing the exercise wrong, or it doesn't fit your body very well, or something like that. Because after a few weeks, you probably should have like gotten accustomed to it. And if it was just from the novelty, then that should have kind of cleared up by now. And then some red flags for pain that should probably give you a sign that like something is probably actually wrong. Just a kind of generalized feeling of doom or like something being wrong. If you've ever had like a major medical event, you probably know like what I'm talking about. You can kind of just like tell something is wrong. That's generally a pretty good feeling. Well, pretty good sign, not a good feeling. Obviously, does it look and function normally? If not, then that's probably a concern. Was it accompanied by a very loud, often audible by others, like outside of your body, kind of popping sound or an internal squelching sound along with abnormal sensations? That would definitely be cause for concern. And is the pain radiating or shooting like kind of out to different parts of the body and your limbs? That would also be a cause for concern.
Nothing ever felt weirder than pulling a spinal ripper and feeling it in my toes. When it happens.
That's a good example, yeah. So then quickly to touch on injuries, since we did kind of differentiate injuries from pain, this is about like true injuries. So the injury incidence rate in weightlifting was 2.4 to 3.3 injuries per 1,000 hours of training. And for powerlifting, it was 1.0 to 4.4 injuries per 1,000 hours. And then frankly, I would say if you're just casually weight training instead of competing in these strength sports, your rate is probably even lower than that. And just to do some quick math as a hypothetical, if you trained 45 minutes twice per week, that will take you 666 or 67 weeks to reach 1,000 hours of training. And if we say there's 2 injuries per 1,000 hours, then you might have an injury every 334 weeks, which would be 6.5 years. So you're probably pretty unlikely to get injured weight training.
Unless you're doing something stupid.
Yeah. So that's not exactly how injuries work, obviously, or like statistics, but I think it illustrates a good point that injuries are much less common in strength training than people kind of have this idea. Like societally, we have this idea that like resistance training is super dangerous, or if you do something wrong, you're bound to get injured. When in reality, it's like exercises wouldn't be very good if you could like just suddenly get injured if you did like one little thing wrong. Like we probably wouldn't prescribe stuff like that because it's just too risky. And then in regards to other sports, there was a meta-analysis of a whole bunch of different sports, and it found the average sport had 2.64 injuries per 1,000 hour, which lines up pretty well with resistance training. And two very common sports, soccer and basketball, had injury rates of 7.2 and 4.3 injuries per 1,000 hours. So if you're not afraid to do soccer or basketball, you shouldn't be afraid to resistance train because it's less injuries per 1,000 hours.
I'm honestly shocked that American football's just not on that list on the three highest. Like, I could see judo and basketball, but
yeah, that is pretty surprising.
Ew. Oh, that helmet's probably doing some favors, but.
So when should you skip training? I would say if you're sick, you should be considerate to others, just like how you shouldn't show up to class if you're sick because you'll get other people sick and then they have to miss class. You shouldn't show up to the gym if you're sick because then they'll get sick and they'll have to skip class and the gym. If you're so underslept or overstressed, that training would just be detrimental at that point. Like we said earlier, training is just intentionally applying physical stress to the body. So you should make sure that that's not going to be like too much for you to handle. And then if you have major life events, you should just skip the gym. Like I think some people worry about that too much, but we'll get to that in just a second. And then two things that I like, I call it the automobile test. It's just something I do personally. If I don't feel like I could comfortably like drive on the interstate, just hypothetically, you know, like I'm not with it enough or I'm too tired for that, then I'm probably also too tired to stick my body under a few hundred pounds of weight. And then also, if you don't feel well enough to go to school, then you probably don't feel well enough to go to the gym. So those are two just pretty good rules of thumb. And then there's also some research that shows a week or two off makes no real difference in the long term in terms of your progress. So if you look at it in like, say a year, this 1 week of you being sick makes literally no difference at that kind of time scale. So as long as you're pretty consistent outside of these sorts of events, then it's totally fine to miss for these sorts of reasons. And then if you have anxiety about getting started at the gym, here's some couple ideas just sort of based around exposure therapy, which is essentially the idea if something's intimidating, then you make small steps towards doing it, and that kind of builds up some confidence. So if going to the gym and doing the full workout sounds scary, you can set a 15-minute timer and just go to look around, you know, because it's a lot easier to convince yourself, okay, I'm just gonna like go walk around the gym for 15 minutes than to do your full workout. Or you can go and do a few exercises that you feel more comfortable with and then try and work towards doing all of it. And then, like, why resistance training is enjoyable. A lot of these apply for me personally. So there's clear objective progress resulting from your effort. I feel like a lot of things in life that's kind of lost. Like your grades don't necessarily always reflect how much effort you put in, because oftentimes they're kind of bogus assignments, or it's something that's ridiculously hard and you have to work with a group. So I really like resistance training for that reason. Also, it's kind of like meditation, but not boring. You don't have to just sit there. You can do something while you try and stay present and active. And then it also comes with great health benefits while trying to practice that. Being mindful can give you some peace of mind from all the thinking. And then also, resistance training is challenging, but you're always in control, which is a nice change from life where you don't really get to choose the challenges most of the time. And then resistance training makes life easier. If you have to move a 50-pound mini fridge for your friend, it's going to be a lot easier if you regularly pick up 400 pounds then if 50 pounds is the heaviest thing that you can pick up, and now you're trying to move it. So some resources for you guys. I'll circle back to the program at the end, but here's a little map of the UFC for anyone that hasn't been before. So there's the entrance, and the front desk is right there. That's where you would swipe in with a card, just like what we did for attendance. And then the restrooms are here. The blue, by the way, is the first floor, and the black kind of overlay is the second floor. So the restrooms are right here in the lobby. The main weight room is over here. There's a little hallway. So most of the leg machines from the program are going to be right over here in the hallway. Most of the upper body machines are right over here in the weight room. And there's a side plank in the program as well. So if you needed like an open area for doing that, then this sort of second floor open area right here would probably be a good spot. And then some informational resources, people that have YouTubes or websites, those sorts of things. They're kind of sorted by category. So I'll send out the slides if you guys want like copies of this. But these are all people that I feel like in general have like fairly reputable and good information. And then second slide. And then there's just some of the references.
Great job.
Thank you. Yeah, so the program, it's set up with 5 weeks and 2 days per week to hit those physical activity guidelines. So the first exercise, exercise 1, it's a machine leg press. So the name is here. The muscles that it trains, it has both the technical term and like layman's term. So your glutes, that's your butt. And then there's a video link to a little guide that will show you how to adjust the machine and then how to use it. So then the sets and reps, it's 1 easy warm-up set and then 2 sets of 8 to 12 reps. And then the goal difficulty is in reps in reserve, like we covered earlier. And this way it's set up so that you progressively get to higher intensities. We try and start out easy and build you up over time. And then these boxes are really for you to use. So an example, the weights and reps performed, you might write 100 for 12 reps and 120 pounds for 8 reps. And then there's the rest time for between the sets. And then you can use the notes section for things like writing down the machine settings. I stuck just that one in case people didn't know what to do for the warm-up sets. And then just to quickly cover it, so the very last week, we're trying to get you to doing no reps in reserve so that you can kind of calibrate your scale. It lets you go actually to failure, and then you can kind of see whether you were right in terms of how many reps you thought you had left, or if you actually could do a few more than you were thinking. And then I haven't gotten to it yet. I'll try to within the next 24 hours-ish before I send it out, but I'll just write some like brief guidelines as to like if you wanted to do another block after this, like roughly what it could look like. Like obviously I can't program for all of you forever, for free at least. But I can put like some general guidelines, like you can swap this exercise for another one of this type or something like that. All right, so that's what I had for today. Thank you all for coming. I think, yeah, we have a decent while for questions if anyone has anything.
During his presentation?
I got 2 questions.
Okay.
One, would stretching still be good to like improve or regain mobility?
Oh, definitely.
Sure.
Yeah, because I remember like just a few days after I got here, my legs got stiff again.
Yeah, you can do all the stretching that you want to. It's just I didn't stick any in the program.
Yeah. I know, I was just saying like in general.
Yep.
Also, is there like a printout of the program?
Yeah, I'll send you guys an email copy